I used to be on the road constantly for my job, and I was never picky about where I stayed. Most nights, I booked whatever was cheap and available, as long as it had a bed that didn't feel like cardboard and a shower with hot water. I'd done that for years without a single problem, so hotels stopped feeling like places where anything could happen. They were just stops between workdays. That mindset changed on a trip I took for a training event in a small city in Pennsylvania. I checked into a plain-looking hotel that was technically fine, but depressing in a way I can't fully explain. The lobby was small, and the carpet was this worn, dark red that made the whole place feel older than it probably was. The air had a stale, dusty smell that reminded me of my grandma's house, like old fabric and heat that never quite circulates. The woman at the front desk barely looked up when she handed me my key card. Nothing about her seemed unusual, and nothing about the hotel did either. My room was on the 3rd floor. On the way up, I remembered noticing how quiet everything was. Not just late at night, quiet, but empty quiet, like sound got swallowed as soon as it left your mouth. The hallway lights were on, but the place still felt half asleep. I walked to my door, swiped in, and stepped into a room that looked exactly like 100 other cheap hotels. Small bed, basic desk, little bathroom off to the side. I tossed my bag onto the bed, turned on the TV for background noise, and tried to unwind. I'd been driving for hours, and my body felt heavy in that way it does when you've been sitting too long. After a shower, I lay there watching whatever was on, letting my eyes get blurry, and eventually I shut the lights off and fell asleep. Sometime later, I woke up in the dark because of a sound that didn't belong. It was soft, almost careful, something dragging or sliding across the floor. At first, half asleep, my brain tried to label it as something normal. The ice machine, pipes, someone rolling luggage in the hallway. I was tired enough that I almost ignored it. Then I heard it again. This time, it wasn't down the hall. It was right at my door. I sat up, and for a second, I didn't move. I just listened, holding my breath without meaning to, waiting for another sound that would explain it. When nothing else happened, I reached over and clicked on the lamp beside the bed. The room came into view in that harsh yellow hotel light, and my eyes went straight to the bottom of the door. Something pale was poking out from underneath, just the edge of it, like whoever pushed it had stopped once it was visible. I got up slowly, the way you do when you're trying not to make noise, and I walked over and bent down. It was a small piece of folded paper. I picked it up and unfolded it with both hands, feeling my heart thump harder as soon as I saw handwriting. The writing was messy, uneven, like the person had trouble keeping the pen steady, and it didn't say much, just a few words, but it was enough to make my stomach drop. It was telling me someone was watching me from somewhere inside the hotel. I stood there with the note in my hand, staring at it like reading it again would make it turn into something harmless. I hadn't heard a single footstep after it appeared. No shuffle, no retreating shoes. The hallway had been completely silent, like it was holding its breath too. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. I kept looking at the door, then looking back at the note, trying to decide whether opening the door was the smart move or the stupid one. In the end, I didn't open it. I slid the chain lock into place and went back to the bed. I sat with my back against the wall, angled so I could see the door clearly, and I left the lamp on. Sleep wasn't even an option anymore. My body was tired, but my brain was wide awake, running through possibilities I didn't like. About 20 minutes passed like that. I kept checking the clock, then checking the door, then checking the clock again. Just when the quiet started to feel normal again, I heard the same sound. A slow, gentle scrape at the threshold. I stared at the gap under the door, and after a second, another small piece of paper eased through, inch by inch, like it was being guided by someone's fingertip. That careful slowness made it worse. It felt deliberate, like whoever was doing it wanted me to hear it happening. I walked over and picked it up. My hands were colder than they should have been. When I unfolded the paper, the message was even more unsettling than the first one. It said the person had been inside my room earlier that day before I arrived. and it said they liked watching people sleep in that hotel. The handwriting looked shakier this time, like the pen had been pressed too hard in places and barely touched the paper in others. Reading it made my chest tighten. It wasn't just someone is messing with you anymore. The idea of a stranger having access to my room, being in there before me, hit differently. It felt real in a way I couldn't talk myself out of. I scanned the room, even though I knew nobody was standing there in plain sight. Then I started checking anyway. I looked under the bed first, expecting nothing, finding nothing. I opened the closet, pushed the hanging clothes aside, checked the corners. I went into the bathroom and pulled the shower curtain back fast, like I was trying to catch something before it could move. Everything was empty, exactly how it should be. I sat down again, trying to decide if I should call the front desk, but it was after 2 in the morning, and paranoia had started settling in. I kept thinking about the possibility, just the possibility that whoever was doing this could work there. The notes had that unstable look to them, like maybe an older person or someone who wasn't all there, someone who could have keys or know which rooms were empty. I told myself it could be a prank. It would have been easier if it felt like a prank, but it didn't. The notes felt targeted, like someone had chosen me. For the next half hour, I barely moved. I listened to every tiny sound in the room as if it could turn into footsteps at any moment. The air conditioner clicked on and I jumped. Pipes ticked somewhere in the walls and my muscles went tight. I kept my eyes fixed on the door, like staring hard enough could keep it shut. I made a decision in my head. If another note came, I was leaving immediately. I wasn't going to sit there all night playing along with whatever this was. Eventually, there was a stretch of silence long enough that my breathing started to slow. I hated how relieved I felt, like my body was trying to settle back into normal just because nothing happened for a few minutes. And then I heard it again. The scrape was slower than before, drawn out, almost theatrical, like the person on the other side wanted me to pay attention. I got up, walked to the door, and watched a third piece of paper slide under, taking its time. I picked it up without even thinking, unfolded it, and my throat went dry. This one didn't match the tone of the first two. It didn't talk about watching me from the hotel. It didn't talk about being in the room earlier. It said something else entirely. It said the person was already inside the room with me again. I stared at those words for a long time. My eyes moved over them again and again, like I could convince myself I'd misread it. Then I looked up slowly and turned my head, scanning the room as if the corners had changed while I was reading. Even though I'd already checked, I checked again. I turned in a full circle, forcing my eyes to land on every shadowed spot. Behind the curtains, the corner by the desk, the bathroom doorway. I felt like I couldn't pull air into my lungs properly. The thought of someone hiding close enough to hear me breathe made my chest feel tight and wrong. I didn't stay to reason it out. I grabbed my bag, not bothering to pack anything neatly, just getting my hands on it, like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway outside was empty, lit by that dull hotel lighting. With no movement anywhere, I unhooked the chain, opened the door fast, and stepped out. I pulled it shut behind me harder than I meant to, then started moving down the hallway quickly. I tried to be quiet, but I also wanted distance immediately. I didn't want to be near that door. I didn't want to be on that floor. When I reached the stairs, I finally looked back. At the far end of the hallway, near the last room, I thought I saw a dark shape shift around the corner. Just a brief movement, like someone had been standing there and stepped back out of view the moment they noticed me looking. It was so quick I couldn't swear to it, but it was enough to make my stomach drop all over again. I went down to the lobby 2 steps at a time. This time, there was a different employee at the front desk. A guy who looked like he'd been fighting sleep for hours. When I told him what had happened, about the notes and the sound under the door, his face changed from tired to confused in a way that didn't look fake. He told me there were only 3 other guests staying on my floor, and none of them had been wandering around. He offered to move me to another room or let me check out early. I didn't want another room in the same building. I didn't want to sleep anywhere near that hallway again. I told him I wanted to check out and leave, even though it was after 3 in the morning. Before I went, I asked if he could come upstairs with me and look at the room, just to see if anything was off. An open window, something disturbed, anything that might explain how someone could have gotten in. He hesitated, but then he came with me, using a master key. When we opened the door and stepped inside, the room looked normal, exactly like it had when I left it. The bed was still made the same way. The lamp was still on. Nothing jumped out as obviously wrong. Then he checked the window. The latch was broken, not loose, not worn. Broken in a way that looked recent, like something had forced it or snapped it on purpose. The employee's expression tightened, and he got quieter. He said maybe someone from outside had gotten in earlier. I didn't want to hear explanations anymore. I just wanted out. I grabbed my bag, walked out with him, and left the building as soon as he finished talking. I drove to another hotel about 20 minutes away and got a couple hours of restless sleep that barely counted. The next morning, I called the original hotel to ask if they'd found anything else, if they'd checked cameras, if anyone had noticed anything strange. They told me nothing unusual turned up. No footage showed anyone near my room. No other guests reported problems. The way they talked about it made it sound like it was nothing, like the whole thing was some kind of misunderstanding. But I didn't believe them. What I remember most isn't even the broken latch. It's the feeling of standing in that room with the lamp on, knowing someone had been close enough to slide paper under my door without making a sound. And I still can't get that third note out of my head, the one that said the person was already inside with me again, because I checked everywhere, more than once. And that broken window latch makes me think whoever it was didn't need the hallway at all. It makes me think they could have been coming and going long before I ever realized anything was wrong. I never went anywhere near that hotel again. And even now, when I'm alone in a room at night, sometimes I catch myself staring at the bottom of the door, waiting for that slow sliding sound to come back. I stopped at a hotel in Virginia once during a long drive to visit family because I honestly couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. It was late, close to midnight, and I remember feeling that dull, foggy kind of tired where even simple decisions feel slow. From the outside, the place looked plain but not unsafe. The sign was lit, the lot had only a handful of cars, and most of the windows were dark, like everyone was already asleep. Inside, the lobby was quiet and dim. The guy behind the front desk barely acknowledged me. He didn't do the usual small talk, didn't ask how my night was going, nothing like that. He just handed me a key and told me the floor number. I was too worn out to think much of it, so I took it and headed for the elevator. My room was on the 3rd floor. The hallway lighting up there was low, almost like the bulbs were turned down on purpose. As I walked, I noticed nearly every door had a "Do Not Disturb" sign hanging from the knob. It wasn't just one or two, it was a lot of them, all lined up like nobody wanted to be noticed. The whole floor felt strangely empty, like the building was occupied, but not alive, like everyone was hiding out rather than sleeping. My room was at the very end of the hallway. When I opened the door, nothing looked obviously wrong. But the room didn't have that clean, reset feeling most hotels have. It was subtle stuff. The lamp on the nightstand was angled slightly, like it had been bumped. One of the dresser drawers was left cracked open. The blanket on the bed had a crease near one corner that looked like someone had been sitting there not long ago, then stood up. It wasn't enough to prove anything, but it made my brain pause for a second. I told myself housekeeping probably rushed, or maybe the last guest checked out late and they did the quickest turnaround possible. I didn't want to overthink it, especially that tired. I dropped my bag on the chair, turned the TV on for noise, and started getting ready to sleep. But once I got into bed, that messy feeling kept tugging at me. The longer I stared at the ceiling, the more those little details bothered me. It didn't help that the guy at the desk hadn't said a word about cleaning staff or anything, and the whole hotel felt almost abandoned. Still, I forced my thoughts away from it and eventually drifted off. I don't know how much time passed, but I woke up because I heard my doorknob move. At first, it was so quiet I thought it might have been something else. like the air conditioner cycling or the building settling. Then I heard it again, a faint little click, like someone was testing it carefully, trying to see if it would turn without making much noise. My eyes went right to the door. The room was dark except for the TV glow. I'd fallen asleep with it on, and that flickering light made the shadows feel like they were shifting. In that dim light, I could see the doorknob move just slightly. Someone was definitely on the other side. Then it stopped. I stayed completely still, listening so hard my ears felt strained, waiting for footsteps or a voice, something that would tell me what was happening. Instead, a different sound came a moment later, metal scraping softly against the lock, careful and controlled. It sounded like a key being guided into the keyhole. That made no sense. Nobody should have a key to my room except staff. I heard the key turn. The handle didn't swing open, but the door shifted enough that a thin slice of hallway light appeared along the edge. The door pressed inward gently once, like whoever it was testing whether they could push past the latch. Then it stopped. I waited for someone to speak, an apology, a mistake, anything. But there was nothing. No footsteps either. After a few seconds, the door eased back into place and the hallway light disappeared. It closed softly, like the person stepped away instead of walking off normally. I lay there for a long time, tense and wide awake. I kept listening for movement in the hall, but I didn't hear anything else. After almost an hour of nothing, my tired brain started trying to explain it away. Maybe it was an employee who had the wrong room number. Maybe they tried the key, realized it wasn't theirs, and left before I could react. I finally got up and rechecked the lock. Then exhaustion took over, and I fell asleep again, the way you do when your body just gives up. The second time I woke up, I remember the time because I glanced at my phone right after. It was around 2:15 a.m. At first, I wasn't sure what had pulled me out of sleep. I just knew something didn't feel right. Then I heard it, barely there, rustling somewhere in the room. Not the TV, not the air conditioner, something closer, something that sounded like fabric shifting, like a bag being handled, like someone moving carefully so they wouldn't knock anything over. And immediately, I knew I wasn't alone. I didn't want to sit up. Every part of me wanted to stay flat and pretend I hadn't noticed, but that wasn't possible. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I slowly lifted myself and looked toward the corner where I'd left my bag. The moment I moved, the rustling stopped. In the weak, uneven darkness, I could just make out a shape near my bag. It wasn't a clear outline, more like a person-shaped shadow that didn't belong there. It looked like someone leaning over my things. My voice came out shaky before I could stop it. I asked who it was. A deep male voice answered right away, calm like he'd been expecting it. He said it was housekeeping, and that he was sorry, and that he was leaving. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I was frozen, watching. The shadow moved away from my bag and toward the door. The door opened and closed again. It was fast, but not panicked, like he'd done it before. The second the door shut, I snapped the light on and rushed over, sliding the chain lock into place. My hands were trembling. I went straight to my bag, and even before I checked the pockets, I could tell. Things weren't where I'd put them. The zipper was slightly off. The way it sat on the chair looked disturbed. Someone had gone through it. I stood there trying to steady myself for a minute, like my brain needed time to catch up with what just happened. Then I called the front desk and told them someone with a key had come into my room and was digging through my stuff. The person I spoke to told me flatly that there was no housekeeping staff there at that time. That was the moment everything shifted from weird to serious. I stopped thinking about it like a misunderstanding and started thinking about it like an actual break-in. I threw my things back into my bag without even organizing, just stuffing everything where it fit. Then I went downstairs to the lobby, called the police, and insisted they check the surveillance footage. When the police arrived, the desk worker finally agreed to pull up the cameras. Watching that footage is something I still wish I could erase. It showed a large, intimidating-looking man walking the hallways over and over, lingering, moving in a way that didn't look normal, like he was hunting for something. He went to my door multiple times before he finally unlocked it and went inside like he belonged there. The guy at the front desk said the man wasn't an employee and that he must have stolen a master key somehow. I remember how casually he said it, like that explained everything, like it wasn't the worst possible answer. I got my money back and left immediately. I didn't care that it was the middle of the night. I drove another half hour away and ended up sleeping in my car because I couldn't bring myself to check into another place after that. Ever since then, hotels haven't felt the same to me. Something about locking a door and trusting that it means anything just doesn't feel as solid as it used to. I've even wondered more than once if I could have gone after the hotel for negligence or putting me in danger, but I never did. I just wanted it behind me. I try not to think about what would have happened if I hadn't woken up the second time. Back when I worked nights for a small delivery company, my sleep schedule was always messed up. On my days off, I'd take quick weekend trips by myself just to feel normal again. Nothing fancy, just a change of scenery, a quiet drive, somewhere to reset. On one of those trips, I booked a cheap hotel in New Jersey because it was close to a hiking trail I wanted to hit the next morning. The place wasn't completely falling apart, but it had that old stale smell that never really goes away. The hallways were also way too quiet, like the building was empty, even though the parking lot said otherwise. I checked in early evening. The woman at the front desk handed me my key and mentioned, almost casually, that housekeeping had already cleaned all the rooms for the night. At the time, it sounded like pointless information. Later, it ended up being the detail I couldn't stop thinking about. My room was on the second floor. As I walked down the hallway, one of the lights above me flickered, like it was struggling to stay on. I didn't really react because I was exhausted. All I wanted was food, a shower, and sleep. When I opened my door, the room looked clean at first. The bed was made tight, the sheets tucked in like someone had taken the time. But little things were off. The pillow on the chair was sitting crooked, like it had been grabbed and tossed back without care. I straightened it without thinking and turned on the tiny TV just to have some noise. I ate a few snacks, sat there for a bit, then took a shower. When I came out, the bathroom mirror was fogged over and the room felt colder than it had earlier. Not by much, just enough that I noticed it. And I told myself it was the AC kicking on or the damp air from the bathroom, and I tried not to make anything out of it. I got into bed, but my eyes kept drifting to one dark corner near the small closet. It wasn't a logical fear. It was that annoying feeling you get when a shadow sits in the wrong shape, and your brain insists it's something else. I knew the corner was empty, but I kept catching myself staring at it anyway, like I expected to see a person standing there. Eventually, I fell asleep. Sometime after midnight, a soft sound pulled me awake. At first, I couldn't place it. It was quiet and slow, like something dragging across the carpet near the corner of the room. I opened my eyes and listened, trying not to move. The curtains were thin, so there was a faint wash of light coming in from the parking lot outside. Just enough to make out shapes. I told myself I was half dreaming, still stuck between sleep and waking up. Then I heard breathing. Not mine, not the air conditioner. It was coming from near the closet, and it sounded heavy and controlled, like someone trying to breathe quietly and failing. That was the worst part. It didn't sound like a machine. It sounded like a person forcing themselves to stay still. I froze instantly. My whole body went tight, like if I moved even a little, whoever it was would know I was awake. I tried to convince myself it had to be the AC, but the unit was on the other side of the room, and it made a completely different kind of noise. This breathing had weight to it. It paused. It resumed. It didn't loop like a motor. I didn't want to sit up. I was scared of what I'd see. But after a few seconds, that felt like minutes. I forced myself to move. I pushed up slowly onto my elbows and looked toward the closet. At first, it was just darkness. Then I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The closet door was partly closed. I knew it had been wide open earlier. I remembered checking that corner when I first got in, even opening the closet without a second thought like everyone does in a hotel room. I hadn't shut it. But now it wasn't open anymore. It wasn't slammed shut either. It looked like it had been gently pulled, almost closed, leaving a thin gap. I stared at that gap and listened. The moment I sat up, the breathing stopped. That terrified me more than the breathing itself, because it meant whatever was there noticed the change. It meant it was aware of me. I wanted to jump up and run out of the room, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I felt stuck, like my brain was screaming at me and my muscles were ignoring it. After about a minute of silence, I made myself move again. I got out of bed slowly, keeping my eyes on the closet. I backed toward the door instead of turning my back. My hands were shaking as I reached for the knob. I turned it as quietly as I could and stepped out into the hallway. The hall was empty. Somehow, it felt even quieter than before, like the building had gone still just to listen. My heart was pounding so hard I felt lightheaded. I didn't even stop to think. I went straight downstairs to the front desk, and there was no one there. The desk phone was ringing, that sharp, repetitive sound filling the lobby, but nobody picked it up. It kept going, echoing off the walls, and it made everything feel wrong. I stood there trying to decide what to do next, because the last thing I wanted was to go back upstairs by myself. A few minutes later, the woman from the front desk finally came out from a back room. She looked tired, like she'd been sleeping. I told her someone was in my room. I expected her to panic. Instead, she looked confused. She told me housekeeping was already gone for the night, and that nobody had keys to guest rooms except her and one older housekeeper who had left hours earlier. She offered to come check the room with me or move me to another one. The calm way she said it almost made me question myself, like maybe I'd woken up and imagined the breathing, but I couldn't ignore how real it sounded. I asked her to come upstairs with me and check anyway. We walked back up together. I was bracing myself the entire time, expecting the closet to be shut or the room to look disturbed. But when she opened the door and we stepped inside, everything looked normal. The closet was wide open again. The pillow on the chair was straight, the way I'd left it earlier. Nothing looked shifted. Nothing looked touched. The woman checked behind the curtains, in the bathroom, even looked under the bed, and she found nothing. Then she suggested maybe I'd had a nightmare or woken up disoriented. It honestly irritated me, not because she was trying to be rude, but because it felt like she was dismissing me. Still, I was tired and embarrassed, and I didn't want to argue. I just wanted to feel safe enough to rest. So I asked to switch rooms. She gave me a different key for a room farther down the hall and left me to it. I moved my stuff over quickly, locked the door, and checked every corner like I'd turned into a paranoid person overnight. I looked in the closet twice. I checked behind the curtains. I even stood in the bathroom doorway for a second listening. When I finally lay down, sleep still wouldn't come. I stared at the ceiling, listening for anything. Footsteps, voices, a door closing. It was only around 1 a.m., and the night felt stretched out like it was never going to end. After about an hour, I finally started to drift, and then I heard something that made my whole body go cold. It was the sound of a housekeeping cart rolling down the hallway, moving slowly. The wheels squeaked in that unmistakable way, the noise bouncing down the corridor. The problem was, it was way past housekeeping hours, and the woman at the desk had just told me no one else was working. I sat up and listened. The squeaking stopped right outside my door. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe normally. I tried to make myself as quiet as possible, just so I could hear what was happening on the other side. Then I heard it, breathing, right outside the door. It was the same heavy, slow breathing I'd heard in the first room, the same deliberate sound like someone was trying to keep it quiet, but couldn't help it. It went on for almost a full minute. My phone was across the room on the desk, and I couldn't bring myself to reach for it. I was too scared to move and make noise. Then there was a gentle sound against the door. Not a normal knock, not knuckles tapping. It sounded like someone pressing their palm softly to the wood, feeling it. Like they were testing the door the way you'd test something to see if it would give. That was somehow worse than knocking, because it felt patient. Personal. After a while, the breathing stopped, the cartwheels squeaked again, and the sound slowly traveled down the hallway until it faded. I stayed frozen for a few more minutes, waiting for it to come back. When I finally stood up, my legs felt weak. I went to the peephole and looked out. The hallway was empty. No cart, no person, nothing. I picked up my phone and thought about calling the front desk again, but I already knew how it would sound. I pictured the woman's calm face, the way she had acted like I was confused, and I couldn't handle being treated like that again. Instead, I latched the chain, shoved the chair against the door, and stayed awake for hours. All I could think about was the closet door in the first room, the breathing, how it stopped the second I moved. I kept trying to tell myself it was just someone on my floor messing around, but it didn't feel like a prank. It felt like someone taking their time. Around sunrise, I finally worked up the nerve to leave the room. I went downstairs to check out as early as I could. The woman from the night before was gone, and a man was at the front desk instead. I told him what happened. He gave me this look, like he didn't want to hear it, but he'd heard things before. Then he said something that still bothers me when I think about it. He told me they hadn't even had a housekeeper on staff for the last week. He said the woman who used to work nights just stopped showing up, and since then, whoever was working the front desk had been cleaning rooms when they could. The way he explained it felt careful, like he was trying to keep it vague to protect the hotel's image, like there was more to it, and he didn't want to admit it. I asked him if the missing housekeeper had keys to the rooms. He said yes. I didn't argue after that. I didn't ask for anything else. I just left, and I didn't look back at the building. The whole drive home, I kept thinking about what the woman at the desk told me during check-in, that housekeeping had already been through all the rooms for the night. That didn't line up with what the man said at all. I don't know if she made it up to sound professional, or if she truly believed the missing woman had been there. All I know is the breathing I heard sounded real, and the way that closet door moved when I knew I hadn't touched it still makes me feel sick. I can't prove it, but I've always had the same thought since that night. I think someone was already hiding in that room before I ever arrived, and I think they were still somewhere in that hotel while I tried to sleep. I've worked as a house person at a hotel for a while now. It's kind of a mix between maintenance and housekeeping. Most of what I do is support the front desk, fixing things in rooms, bringing up extra supplies, handling whatever problem pops up. I'm also responsible for keeping our pool area clean and stocked with towels, and that part matters for what happened. This was in the summer of 2023. My boss had just hired a new front desk employee. For privacy, I'll call her Brianna. She worked nights, so my schedule got shifted around so I could be there during those late hours to help out. It was a Wednesday night, which at our hotel usually means it's completely dead. No check-ins, barely any calls, just a slow shift where you try to stay awake. Me and Brianna mostly talked off and on while we did our normal tasks. At some point, I decided to go handle the pool. At our hotel, if a guest wants to swim, they have to fill out a form with all the rules, and then we hand them a pool key. Employees, on the other hand, have master keys that open pretty much everything. I clipped my master key onto the pool door lock, turned it, and the door opened. The pool area was empty, just that warm, humid indoor pool smell mixed with chemicals. There's a storage room in there where we keep towels and supplies like chlorine. I opened the storage room and saw the towel rack was almost wiped out, so I started grabbing armfuls to restock. I was bent down reaching for one more towel near the bottom when I heard something hit the water. It wasn't a splash like someone jumped in. It was smaller, but sharp enough that it made me jerk so hard I dropped the towels. My first thought was that someone was in there messing around, or a kid had gotten in somehow. I came out of the storage room quickly and looked straight at the pool. One of our lifesavers, the flotation ring, was bobbing on the surface. I just stood there for a second, trying to understand how that was even possible. That lifesaver is not something that accidentally falls into the pool. It's set up in a specific spot. It would take someone physically picking it up and throwing it. I scanned the entire pool area, looking for movement, listening for footsteps, anything. Nobody. The room was empty, except for me. I walked over, pulled the lifesaver out of the water, and hung it back up. I tried to act like it was nothing, but my skin felt tight, like I'd gotten a cold chill even though the air in there was warm. I forced myself to finish restocking the towels, then I got out of the pool area as fast as I reasonably could. When I got back to the desk, I asked Brianna if anyone had been to the pool. She said no. I didn't tell her what I'd seen. She was new, and I didn't want to sound like the guy who starts talking about weird stuff on her first week. So I kept it to myself and tried to push it out of my head. The shift stayed quiet until around 9:30 p.m. when I grabbed a maintenance slip. It said the toilet in room 324 wasn't working. I headed up there, moving on autopilot the way you do when you've fixed the same things 100 times. I let myself into 324 with my key. When you open the door, the bathroom is immediately on the right. If you walk straight past it, the two beds are on the right side of the room. I went straight into the bathroom and lifted the toilet lid to start adjusting the parts inside. There wasn't supposed to be anyone in there. Brianna had already told me that room wasn't even due to have a guest until Friday. I was messing with the valves and the flapper, trying to figure out what wasn't catching, when the temperature dropped all at once. It wasn't gradual. It was like someone opened a freezer door in the room for a few seconds. I stopped moving and just stood there, feeling the hairs on my arms start to lift. My first instinct was to look at the vents, like maybe the AC kicked on hard, but then my brain caught up. It was summer. A warm summer night. There was no reason for a sudden cold blast like that, and almost as soon as that thought hit, the air went back to normal. The hair on my arms settled down like nothing had happened. I glanced at the thermostat out in the room and saw it read 68 degrees. That should have calmed me down, but it didn't. All it did was remind me of what happened at the pool. At that point, I just wanted to finish the job and get out of there. I went back to work on the toilet. It couldn't have been more than a couple minutes before it started flushing normally again. I remember feeling a quick rush of relief, listening to the tank refill, watching the water level rise back like it was supposed to. That's when I heard a loud thump from somewhere outside the bathroom. It cut straight through the sound of running water. It was heavy enough that it didn't sound like a small object falling. I froze with my hand still near the tank, and right after the thump, that cold feeling came back again. My heart started racing. My mind immediately went to the obvious question: how could something make that noise if nobody was supposed to be in here? I lowered the toilet lid and stepped out of the bathroom. As soon as I turned my head toward the beds, I saw the room phone on the nightstand hanging off the edge, dangling by the cord like it had been pulled. But I barely registered that because my eyes went past it, toward the corner near the bed. There was someone standing there. They were tall, really tall, and completely still. The room lighting was dim, and I couldn't make out a face or clothes or any clear detail. It was just a solid dark shape, like an outline cut out of the light, the kind of darkness that doesn't look like normal shadows. I stood there in the bathroom doorway. Struggling to breathe normally, my body felt locked in place. I couldn't hear anything from it. No footsteps, no shifting, nothing. Then it moved. I can't even tell you what part of it moved. I just know I saw motion, and that was enough. Instinct took over before my brain could form a plan. I took off toward the main door and yanked it open so fast I almost hit myself with it. I got out, pulled it shut, and didn't stop moving until I was back down on the first floor. Brianna was still behind the desk. I didn't explain anything. I just told her I was leaving and that I was punching out. She said goodbye like it was a normal end to a normal shift, and I didn't correct her. The whole drive home, my thoughts wouldn't settle. I kept replaying the pool moment first, the lifesaver hitting the water when there was no one else in the room, and then the room, the sudden cold, the thump, the phone hanging, and that figure in the corner. I don't even like calling it a person now because the more I think about it, the less sense it makes. I couldn't see a single feature, no face, no clothes, nothing I could describe in a way that sounds normal. That's the part that sticks with me. I try to tell myself my mind was messing with me. Long shift, weird lighting, tired brain. That explanation is easier to live with, but I don't actually know if that's true. And that's what bothers me. Nothing like that has happened to me since. I'm grateful for that, because even now I can say without exaggerating that it was the scariest night of my life.